It's wonderful to be here. First theme we're talking about is building integrity and the role of social norms. And I picked this picture to kickstart my presentation because I somehow, this is a scene I witnessed on the road from Morogoro to Dar es Salaam in Tanzania. And I wanted to use it as an allegory of why building integrity sometimes seems like an uphill battle, like we're carrying this huge, heavy weight while riding this tiny little bike. So I'd like to discuss with you some of the findings of two of our GIA's-funded research projects where we explore why is it the case that building integrity seems so difficult and what can we do about it. So. These two research projects, I have to say up front, we worked mostly in Tanzania and Uganda, so just to keep in mind that my observations are context-specific to these two countries. And maybe just to start with a reflection and a recognition that it's really difficult to promote integrity by decree. So this means that formal mechanisms of control and monitoring often do not have the results we expect. And actually, often, they might even backfire and trigger undesired results. So this visualization you see here, it is a case study that we mapped in Tanzania of a competitive land formalization process where the Tanzanian government wanted to allocate unused public lands to businesses on a competitive basis with proposals that would be responsive to the needs and expectations of the communities. So in the process, the communities themselves were involved. So there was this formalization committee involving members of the communities to evaluate the process. Then once a decision was made, that decision would go to the municipal level where it had to be evaluated and see whether the formal criteria had been met by a couple of municipal level officials, and then it would go further to the ministry level for further verification and ultimate approval. So basically what we found is that a business person colluding with a local government official managed to bribe absolutely everybody across these three levels, with the unfortunate result that in the end, with all of these formal monitoring and control instances, there was more corruption than there would have been had these monitoring and control instances not been there. So one thing I wanted to say as well here is that it's important to know, so here we're looking at all the people who were bribed, okay? But one of the things that we learned from the Tanzanian and the Ugandan context is that bribery, the exchange of a bribe, yes, of course, it works to solve the problem at hand, but it's not to be understood as a one-off transaction, because bribes and bribe exchange in these countries is also a way to build a social connection. And it's also based on social norms of reciprocity, so it creates a kind of tit-for-tat dynamic that builds trust and that actually make corruption become increasingly entrenched and it becomes perpetuated. So, just keeping going with the reflection, what are some of the challenges that we have found around building integrity? And one key thing is that it is really difficult to change behaviors vis-a-vis an abstract standard. Rather, we think that one needs to take into account, so what are the actual challenges that people are confronted with? So for example, what are the challenges to making business for small and medium enterprises? And also, we need to think about what incentivizes people to behave the way they do, to make the decisions that they make. So we need to take into account things like social norms and identities. So thinking about challenges in doing business, we spoke to quite a number of collective action practitioners working with the private sector to build anti-corruption initiatives. And one of the things we found is that a purely value-based approach is not necessarily enough to strengthen compliance and promote ethical norms among business. There is often a price that is paid that works against this kind of approach. So just to give you a sense of what I'm talking about, implementing compliance and ethical conduct programs is costly. So here we have SMEs have to already absorb a cost immediately and certainly in the short term. Also, there is a risk that if competitors are not playing by the rule, you will lose business, of course, by playing, by acting with integrity. And all of this, so we're asking SMEs to incur these short-term certain costs in exchange for a future indefinite and unspecified benefit that will come if everybody else is acting accordingly. So it's really difficult, and there are these intertemporal dilemmas that work against a purely based approach to building integrity. So we think that we need to make acting with integrity easy. Focus on problem solving. Like I was saying, what are the challenges that SMEs face in making business? And here, I will not go into the details of this graphic, but this is the bribery network that a businessman in Tanzania, wanting to open a small flour mill business, had to build across 5 different institutions because, opening a business in Tanzania is infamously difficult, time-consuming, and it's just much easier to bribe your way through. So we're thinking that focusing on solving the challenges, such as the ones that this businessman in this case was confronted with, by addressing red tape. And we know we don't want to throw away all the regulations, but we also know that excessively complicated bureaucratic processes are often exploited by abusive public officials to extort bribes and so on. And just improving the ease of doing business should give entrepreneurs like the one in our case study an alternative and a way to solve their problems that does not involve resorting to bribery. Oops, sorry. I also wanted to talk about social norms and what we found about the relevance of social norms. And here what's really important is to recognize that our personal preferences do not necessarily are translated in our decisions and our behaviors. So in some of our past research, we found how social norms of obligation and solidarity with one's group have an effect in terms of public officials being under immense pressure by their families and friends to use their positions to extract resources and opportunities on behalf of family and friends. So this kind of social pressures, and they're materialized in the sense that people who are not considered to be doing enough for their friends and families can be socially isolated, criticized, and sometimes even physically attacked. So in our second project, we looked at the issue of bribery in Tanzanian health facilities, where we found that social norms of reciprocity were underpinning the prevalence and the persistence of bribery. So we designed and piloted an intervention where we wanted to address how to build integrity among health workers. So our intervention was a peer driven intervention. So we identified and recruited champions amongst the health staff who we trained and who then went out and disseminated messages of anti-bribery amongst their peers. But here, one of the things that I wanted to highlight is that on the basis of the research that we did before, we delved out several different messages, you know, taking different angles and different themes, all of them, of course, dealing with anti-bribery, but then we tested them with health professionals, you know, with our target group, to really try to find out what resonated most, what moved them, what was meaningful to them. And what we found is that the professional ethos was what was really important for them. And this also helped us to identify which other stakeholders were key to bring on board. And so we were lucky enough that we were able to work with the Medical Association of Tanzania, who came on board to endorse the intervention and to stand behind it. So again, understanding what are the values and the ideas that are resonating with people, we found was really important. And then besides the peer-driven messaging, we also had other intervention materials. So here, this is a poster that we placed in the hospital. But then we also wanted to use behavioral insights to help people act with integrity in a more easy way. And here, what I'm talking about is, you know, we all know that we do not necessarily behave in ways that we rationally know are good for us or are the right thing. And anybody who's been on a diet trying to lose weight, and you know the foods you have to eat, and then comes the end of the day, and that cookie jar, you're exhausted, that cookie jar just looks irresistible. So you're in a hot state. You're not really thinking rationally, you just go for the cookie because you're in this hot state. So for our intervention, what we found is that the health workers often felt under a lot of pressure when they were being offered a gift, because there are all these associations of the users getting really angry and insulting them and gossiping. So this is a hot state, right, when they are being confronted with this gift. So what we did is we created desk signs which had a user-facing side, very similar to the message in the posters, but then it also had a provider side where we delved out 4 concrete steps to help the health worker refuse a gift in a polite way. So we're still crunching the data in terms of the impact measurement of our intervention, but we have some promising emerging findings where the gift-giving propensity score measured amongst users of the hospital seems to have gone down significantly. So just to end, some few key takeaway messages. So I think that building integrity should not be a struggle, should not mean we need to swim against the tide. It should not be punitive against the people who are the target of our initiatives. Actually, building integrity should be helping people achieve their goals by giving them alternatives where behaving with integrity is, you know, advantageous. And we can be smarter in our programming by thinking on how can we relieve social pressures, and also appealing to what actually moves and is compelling to the intended target of the intervention. Thank you very much.
I'm Peter Evans. I'm now the director of the U4 Anti-Corruption Resource Centre in Bergen. Claudia, great presentation. I just wanted to say that it's been a brilliant body of work on social norms that you've led. The criticism has been about, it helps to understand the problem, but when do we get to the interventions? And I just want to say it's great to see that that time has come. I think there's a lot of weight resting on your shoulders. We need more of this, more sectors, more institutions, more organizations, more problems. But I love the conclusions, as in problem solving, testing, and looking to see if it has an effect. So I think it's a hugely important body of work, but it has been popular in helping to understand problems. And yeah, we needed that shift, and I'm glad that you made it. So many thanks. Brilliant.
Brilliant. Sorry, I'm Sarah Chase, and you're going to hear me blathering on a bit after lunch. I'm a problem admirer normally, so you'll get some more of that. What you highlighted is, without spelling it out, is so often when we think about corruption in various forms, we talk about right and wrong. Oh, do the right thing. What you are highlighting there is that, in fact, for the public official, it's actually a conflict between two different varieties of right, meaning two different types of values are in conflict with each other. And what I loved there was your 4-point thing for the officials. So very often also you'll hear, what's the point of training people? Everybody knows that corruption is bad. But the training can be practical training. How do you go about selecting one value at the expense of the other without destroying your social relationships? And if we can't help and literally train it into people so that those responses become, so that they're not shocked when they get the telephone call or when the person in front of their desk is facing them, so they have ready-made responses. That does need actually to be trained in. So I just think this is stupendous.
Thanks, Sarah. Julio. Hello. Thank you. My name is Julio Base-Terracino. I'm from the OECD. Claudia, thank you very much. I agree. I think Paul just said, we were talking earlier about social norms. Many times we see articles or studies, but not about what is the actionable part of it. Now, my question is to go a bit beyond this. How do you make it sustainable, and how do you scale it up? Because unfortunately, I've seen similar cases in the past 20 years ago, or initiatives which are very difficult to sustain because of the politics, because this is a very sort of small group that perhaps you managed to change, but how do you really make it sustainable in time, and hopefully even make it something bigger? So if you've had some insights on that, it will be great. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Peter and Sarah, for your comments. And so yeah, I mean, this is actually what we're now, so first we wanted to see if the intervention did anything, right? Because if nothing changed or even made things worse, we would have, had to go back to the drawing board. But emerging findings seems to suggest that it did help. So now we are really intensely debating what do we do with it. So I think that just very quickly, one important thing is to really build on what we have achieved so far, because there was a lot of work behind just getting the intervention on the ground in terms of building the contacts, not just with the medical association, but also with the hospital management, with the health workers themselves. So I honestly feel it would be almost indecent to now leave and and not build on that. So we think that we can try other approaches within the hospital, and we know that we have a champion in the hospital manager who wants to make the hospital, which has had one of the worst reputations in Dar es Salaam for bribery, and he really wants to turn that around. So we want to continue working with him. And the other thing in terms of scaling up, I think what has been really important is that we have been working closely with the Tanzanian Prevention and Combating of Corruption Bureau. The prevention team has been on board since the beginning of the project, and now actually my colleague Richard from Tanzania was telling me that the PCCB director really is keen to learn how they can use this approach for other areas and sectors. So we're keen to engage with them. I'm going with my colleague Jacopo to Tanzania in a couple of weeks to meet the PCCB, and hopefully we can get some traction with them going forward.